Welcome to Novelist Spotlight. This is Mike Consul, your host. In addition to being the host of this podcast and interviewing novelists, I am a novelist myself. I have 3 published novels. My latest is titled Lolita Firestone, a supernatural novel, and it is set in Sedona, Arizona and Cairo, Egypt. My previous novel is titled Family Recipes, a novel about Italian culture, Catholic guilt, and the culinary crime of the century. And my first novel is named Hardwood, a novel about college basketball and other games young men play. And that story deals with issues ranging from depression and racism to sex, religion, and university politics. All 3 novels are listed in the episode notes. I hope you will buy them, I hope you will read them, and I hope you will thoroughly enjoy them. Now, on with our program. In the spotlight from Mother England, specifically Brighton, England, which Queen fans will remember Brighton Rock off the Sheer Heart Attack album where Brian May just tore it up, or those of you who are inclined towards literature, which I hope is all of you. If you're listening to this podcast, then you would be thinking maybe of Graham Greene, one of the great British novelists ever, who wrote a novel called Brighton Rock. So Simon Toyne is the guy. He's in Brighton. He's the author of 6 novels. He is, his first was Sanctus, and it hit big. That was back in 2011. That was part of a trilogy. So think in terms of Simon's career starting in 2011, his writing career, his published writing career. Most recently, he published a book called Dark Objects. That was 2021. He was born in the north of England. He studied English and drama at Goldsmiths College and University of London, or is it Goldsmiths College within the University of London? What is that, Simon? Were you at the University of London, or are those 2 different schools?
It's a weird one. It's part of the University of London, but the University of London is made up of lots of different colleges.
Exactly.
So there's the Royal College of Art, Royal College of Music, all this kind of stuff, and Goldsmiths College, where I went to, is one of them.
There you go. So after graduation, he remained in London and began working in television. He worked at the BBC, the famous BBC. He also produced and hosted a true crime series called Written in Blood, where he spoke with best-selling authors such as Tess, Gerritsen, and Karin about the true crimes that inspired their fiction. Again, he lives in Brighton. He's married. He's got 3 children. He's got 2 dogs. One of the ways he inspires himself, one of the ways he generates ideas, is taking walks with his dogs. They must love that, having a published author as an owner who needs to walk to generate ideas, and they get their exercise. Simon, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. And just one correction: it's 7 books, and actually,
7.
And I published the follow-up to Dark Objects last year, 2022, which was called The Clearing.
The Clearing. I
apologize.
That's right.
That's all right. We're up to date now. It's all fine.
And you will find in the episode notes the URL for Simon's website, so you can learn all there is to learn about him. Actually, you'll learn more during this podcast than is on his website if I do my job correctly. For instance, you won't know what the breed of dogs are, and that tells a lot about a person. Simon, your dogs are what breed?
Well, we don't even know what breed our dogs are. They are. So we used to, we had a dog, we had a red setter, which was beautiful, but stupid. Oh my God. Those dogs, what they make up, what they have in beauty, they lack in brain.
Oh, wow.
And because it was a thoroughbred pedigree, it was just always ill. And, you could drop a potato chip on the floor and it would eat it, and you'd have to take it to the vet. It was just such a delicate stuff. It was hard work and expensive. And she got ill way too young and died, and it was really traumatic. And I said to my kids, I said, look, I'm perfectly happy to have another dog, but it's got to be a Heinz 57 variety dog. It's got to be a mutt, a mongrel. It's got to be part goat so that it can eat shoes, and we don't need to take it to the vet. And so that's what we got. So we got a Greek rescue dog, which was rescued on the Greek island of Zakynthos. And long story, but anyway, it was sort of, we knew people who'd got dogs from there, and they were, we knew it was a good outfit, and so we got this dog, and it's black and white, and we called it Woody because it looks like a cow. in terms of coloring. And in Toy Story, Woody the cowboy's waistcoat is like that black and white
Ah,
cowhide.
I was going to
So we called
say,
him Woody. There you go. And in that kind of modern way, we actually had him DNA tested to try and find out because it's impossible to tell just by looking at him what he is. He's a sort of medium-sized dog, sort of floppy ears, quite barrel-chested. And he came back mostly spaniel, partly collie, partly corgi, and a whole bunch of other things. And he's never ill. Like he's now 8, and he's still like a puppy.
well,
And
mixed breeds are healthier, right? They tend to be healthier.
so
They
much
don't have,
healthier,
they're
so
not
much
all
healthier.
inbred and picking up all these, dysplasia, and all these other ailments of when there's all that inbreeding going on. So yeah, they
I
tend to be
know, and
smart. And
exactly, you just sort of think that can't be fun for the dog as well. No one, it's being
no,
sick all the time. So anyway, so we've
absolutely
got
not.
him, and then we got another one to keep him company, and she is sort of half lurcher, half collie, and a bit greyhound. So she is fast.
Oh yeah. Oh, I had
Yeah.
a friend who had a great greyhound. I mean, a straight greyhound. Man, just even when they're trotting, they look like they're. I mean, they're just so they're like gazelles. They're so fast.
It's beautiful to
Um,
see them run. Yeah.
yes, yeah, they're really kind of poetry in motion. So
So that's one.
2011 comes Sanctus, and
Yeah.
I want to give the listeners some of the background on this. But then 2012 is the key. So a year later, then a year later after that, the Tower, 2013. Then just 2 years later, The Searcher comes in 2015. The Boy Who Saw was 2017. Dark Objects didn't come along until 2021. So it kind of knocked you off the pace just a little bit. Is there any story behind that? Is there any reason why Dark Objects took longer? What's the timing on this? Or did you
Uh,
have the trilogy all doped out in your mind ahead of time so it came faster than something like Dark Objects, which is a one-off, correct? Or I'm sorry, not only Dark Objects, but The Clearing just published this year. So that's just a 2 year period. So
Well,
am
it
I
was,
confused?
yeah, no. So Dark Objects was supposed to be a one-off, but I liked the characters so much, and I had another idea. So I just wrote another book. It's in that way. I just was in the groove of that. And Sanctus, because it was my first book. So I had a background in TV. I'd worked in TV for like 20 years, and I'd always wanted to write a book. But when you're working in a creative industry, I mean, you know this as well. It's like if you're working in a creative industry and your creative energy is kind of spent. If you're doing your job properly, your day job properly, there's not much left. You have to
Exactly.
sort of carve out time for it. And I know there's people who do other things like lawyers and whatever who sort of, they need that creative outlet because their day jobs aren't that creative necessarily or creative in a different way. But like for me, it was all, I knew I sort of, if I was going to write a book, I needed to devote some time to try and do it so that, I couldn't, when it didn't work, blame the fact that I was tired, or hadn't given it my best shot. So I sort of quit my job in TV. I would say it was sort of like a midlife crisis where I said to my wife, I either need to buy a sports car and have an affair, or I need to quit my job and try and write a book. And
That's how you got her on board.
there you
Okay.
go.
Yeah.
So she went, why don't you try and write a book? That sounds like a good option. So we did that. And
So you quit a perfally good job. This is how
yeah, I know,
committed you were
crazy.
to
Well, what was I
wanting to tell
thinking?
stories.
Yeah, what was I
But
thinking?
90+% of people will say that after the fact. You don't really have to say that because not only do you quit a perfectly good paying job with 2 children, I think you had 2 at the time,
Yeah.
and a wife, and a mortgage, or at least
And a
rent or
mortgage. Yeah.
mortgage,
Yeah.
and then you moved to France to
That's
do the
right.
work. Did you have to begin with? Your wife was on board, it sounds like, or how much pressure did she put you under, or did you give yourself a timeline, like say, just give me 12 months or give me 18 months, and if it doesn't work, I'm back to BBC?
I gave myself 6 months. So basically, I
Wow.
knew I was going to do it, and so I gave notice at my job, and we sort of saved a bit, and then the whole move to France. So we had 2 kids at the time, but they were very young. They weren't at school yet. They were, I think, 4 and 2, and so it was less disruptive. And I said, well, look, rather than me just take time off and then just sit in the spare room trying to write a book, and it all just seemed the same. Why don't we go on an adventure? Because we can go with the kids and it'll be an adventure. And, when else can we do this? Because, give it a year, they'll be in school. It'll be impossible to go anywhere. But the part of me was also future-proofing failure to the point where I figured, like, in 5 years' time, we could look back at it and go, rather than refer to it as that time I sat in the spare room in my pants trying to write a book that failed, we could refer to it as that time we lived in France.
Yeah. You
For a
traded
bit.
bangers and mash for baguettes and brie.
Exactly, and much more
Yeah, your
exciting.
whole diet
Just
changed,
it
and
was,
we
yeah,
did romance
nice
in the
wine. Yeah, exactly, the
countryside.
whole thing. It was
Did you
just,
do a house exchange with somebody, or did you rent a place there?
we rented. So what we did is we rented our place out in Brighton, and then we rent. And this, I thought I was being clever, and I thought, oh, look, I was looking at the prices of these really nice houses in France, and I noticed that they were significantly cheaper in the winter. And I thought, great, we'll go in the winter. That'll be fun. It'll still be nice, frosty walks and open fires and all this sort of stuff. And it turns out these big old, very attractive French stone houses. There's a reason why they're really nice to go to in the summer, and that's because they're big, thick, cool stone houses. In the winter, when it's really cold, they're like freezers. They're so cold, these houses. They're not built, for heat. And so we'd have a fire on, and you'd be burning practically half a tree in this lovely open fireplace. But you'd have to be practically, like standing in the fire to get any heat from it. As soon as you took one step away from it, you were freezing again.
Exactly.
So that was the reason. But anyway, so
it didn't have a blower on it, and you're wearing gloves typing. Do you type?
All the clothes. Yeah, all the clothes. All the clothes
do you
were on.
handwrite, or do you use a keyboard?
No, I always, because I came from TV, and so you just everything's quick. So it was all, so I would work on Word, and I'd write directly onto the screen, and then edit on the screen and share it on whatever. And I still do. I sort of just because I sort of feel more comfortable doing that. It's sort of I know that, like, writer friends of mine always do the first draft longhand, and I just, the idea of that just fills me with terror. It's just I just get writer's cramp thinking about that.
Exactly.
But no, I'm directly on. I type directly into a Word document right from the get-go.
So was Sanctus already? Was Sanctus already in your head? I mean, you didn't give yourself 6 months, and you had to come up with an idea and write it. You already had an Sanctus in your mind.
Well, you would have thought so. You would have thought that would have been the sensible thing to do, and I thought moving into it. So I'd given notice at work, and we were saving up, and we'd sorted out the rental, and it was all fine, and we were going to go in end of November, and we were going to be there for 6 months. So we were going to come back just as the house started getting expensive again, in the summer. And I thought, and as I was sort of preparing to leave, and leaving my job, I kind of thought that whole thing of write what you know. So I thought 6 months, I know, because I've been working in TV, I know I can be creative on demand. I know I can sit down and produce something because I've had to do it. That discipline already exists. So I knew that wasn't a sort of question mark over that at all. I knew I could produce something, whether it was going to be any good was the big question mark. And I thought, with 6 months, I figured I could probably write a rough first draft of something in 6 months if I already had an idea, and if it was something, the classic write what you know, something close to my own experience that I wouldn't need to research, do loads of research or talk to people and find out about something that, I was unfamiliar with in order to be able to write a story about it. So I had a couple of ideas, 2 or 3 sort of smallish thriller ideas that were sort of more Harlan Coben-esque ideas, sort of ordinary man suddenly gets thrust into extraordinary circumstances and has to figure things out, And one of the ideas was about a TV producer who's making a show and thinks he's captured a murder on some of the rushes, and then his life falls apart, and it was kind of slightly derivative of blow up. But I just figured, it's fine, that I know how that works. I know how. And I worked in commercial television, so where you're basically trying to hold people over breaks and really engage and re-engage them. And so I sort of knew how to write that sort of thriller, a sort of compelling, a propulsive thriller, page turner. So I thought, that's it. I'm going to write something like that. Here's my idea. 6 months, I should be able to have a rough first draft, and then I've got something to work with. Then I can come back to England, maybe, sort of freelance for a bit and finish off this book and, try and get an agent, do all that kind of stuff. But bear in mind, we're going out. So the idea as well was the kids, because they were young, we hired a place way down in the south of France. It's like a day's drive, or, sort of near Toulouse, on the way to the Mediterranean on the south coast. And so the idea was that my wife, we bought a van, an old panel van, and we filled it with mostly kids stuff, toys and clothes and things. And we drove our car as well in convoy. And the whole idea was my wife and I were going to drive down. We were going to make this rented house look very homely by putting up familiar pictures and putting all the kids' toys in it. And then the kids were going to fly down with friends the next day and to this new house. That was the plan. So we're going on the midnight ferry on the end of November, because that's when we decided to go. And a storm blows up in the channel. And the idea was we were going to sleep on the ferry. You can get these little cabins, and it's like a 4 or 5 hour crossing. So we were going to get the midnight ferry, sleep on the ferry, then drive all the next day down to get there and make the house homely. But because of this storm, we didn't sleep at all. We just thought we were going to drown and die, and that was going to be the end of our adventure, and the kids were going to be orphans and all this sort of stuff. So we'd land finally bedraggled and exhausted, but glad to be alive, at about 5 a.m, and drove inland, and we just needed to find somewhere to sleep. And about 40 minutes inland from where we landed is a town called Rouen, which is a kind of mad old place with this huge cathedral in the middle with this bizarre spire that almost looks like this big, tall, high, towering spire that rises over the place. And we drove in, and I saw this spire, and something about the play on words with the name Rouen reminded me of this quote that I'd seen years ago, and was one of those that I liked and sort of had always remembered it and carried it around with me. And that's this quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson, which is, "A man is a god in ruins." And that play on words of ruin and Rouen, I suddenly thought, what if Ruin was a place and there was a god in ruins, in ruin? And just those thoughts, that's, often an idea happens with the collision of two things, and all of a sudden sparks fly. And so we found a cheap hotel and slept for a few hours, and then carried on our journey. And all the way down to this house, which was like a 7-8 hour journey, I just kept thinking about this image of this tower and this quote, "and a man is God in ruins." And by the time we got there, I had come up with the idea for Sanctus, or the end of it, which was way beyond, there was nothing close to my experience. And it was just this big operatic kind of adventure dealing with the whole history of mankind, and a relic that purports to be the bedrock, the foundation upon which all Western religion is based, and a monastery where people go in and never come out, and all of these sorts of fantastical ideas that totally were not something I could write easily in 6 months. And I almost didn't write it, because I just thought it seems like a really big idea, and it's very complicated, and it's going to require a lot of work, a lot of heavy lifting.
But this was after you had already written or doped out the first novel.
I'd written out like a couple of pages of an outline of what of the novel I thought I was going to write. Yeah, so I'd thought about it, and I'd written an outline, ready to sort of hit the ground running when we got to France. But then this other idea just wouldn't go away, and I just thought, well, that's a better idea. And I don't think I've read that book, but I've read similar books to the one I'd planned. And I did think, well, if I'm going to fail at this, I need to fail honestly. I need to give it my best shot. And if I shy away from what clearly is the best idea, even though it's a harder idea, then I've probably failed already. So I
how long did that one take then? I'm going to do Sanctus, and how long did it take to actually execute it?
So that was Sanctus. So basically, I wrote. So in that 6 months, I had to do loads of research to try and make it work, and outlined it and figured it all out, or figured as much.
So this happened on the way.
On the way down in this 8 hour journey.
On the way to France.
Had this idea. Yeah, and literally.
Okay, I see.
Yeah,
I see. So it was a stroke of luck, really.
Well, I don't know. Is it luck? I think sometimes you have to kind of put yourself in a situation to be receptive. Sort of. You have to kind of decide.
1,000 other people would have gone through the exact same experience, and they wouldn't have had the same thoughts. They wouldn't have extrapolated. They wouldn't have turned it into anything. I totally get that, but it was a great inspiration that you
It
ran
was. It was
across.
very, yes, it was very serendipitous. My mind was open. I was open to it, I think. I was sort of, it's like something in my mind had been flicked to receive.
And then you
And
have to execute, which is what it's all about.
yeah, I mean
There's a
that's the
million
hard thing.
ideas out
Yeah, oh,
there,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah.
executing. And you almost were thinking this is too complicated for a 6 month effort, but you pulled it off. Why did you pull it off? I mean, why did you? It's almost like you overachieved a little bit because you were thinking this is too complicated to do in 6 months. But and maybe it took longer than 6 months, but you did pull it off. Why were you able to do that? I mean, do you have any insights into what it is about either the characteristics that you possess or just the situation at the time that made it work?
I think the two things. I think one was I just was just aware, we're all readers first before we're writers. And as a reader, I just thought I'd rather read that book than the other one. I
Mm.
just like if I was given a choice between these two books, that's the one I'd rather read. And the other thing was, I think, was that I said, I sort of, if you're shying away from something because you think it might be difficult, then you've already failed. I just figured the whole point of this was of changing, trying to write a book was to see if I could do it. And if I'm sort of, if I'm pulling my punches right from the beginning just because I'm not sure I'm up to it, then I'm probably not up to it. And so
Yeah, that's a
I
great
just
point.
figured I needed to try, and if I was going to fail, I needed to fail honestly and fail trying the hardest idea. And no, it took way longer than 6 months. By the time the sun started getting warmer and the price of the house started doubling every week, and we had to come back to England, I'd written about, I think, 180 pages and my first draft ended up being uh, like I think it was 140,000 words, so it was about 500 odd pages. So I'd written maybe a third of it in my 6 months. I was supposed to have written a first draft, and I'd written a third of it. And I came back, and I ended up freelancing back at the same company where I'd had a nice steady staff job, and just working on it in between contracts, weekends, doing the usual thing. But it had momentum then. I had this thing and I had this idea, and it sort of wouldn't let me go as well as me. And I just needed to see it through to the end because it was hard because when I came back, everyone was like, "Oh, you went away and write the book. How did that go? Have you written a book?" And it was, "No, I haven't." And you'd see sort of people kind of nod knowingly as if to go, "Yeah, and that's what we figured," and I had, I'd sort of gone away and come back effectively with nothing. And we were back in our flat, and I was back working at the same place, and it was almost like nothing had happened. And the only difference was I had this story that I was slowly kind of like laying down brick by brick to do a first draft. And it
Was
took
that the
me.
most complicated book you've written of your seven?
No, it's not. It was pretty. They've all of my books have been. I think. Well, the last couple have been less complicated. I think they've been more complex in terms of character, but less complicated in terms of plot. But that was the trilogy, which is Sanctus, the Key, and the Tower, were just really complicated, just because there was a whole sort of world building that had to be done, even though it's based in so the town
Yes.
of Ruin, which I built, which is in southern Turkey, doesn't exist, but it's based on a real place.
Yeah.
And the main character is from New Jersey, so it's all set in real places. Apart from the main place, the city of Rouen, which is supposed to be the longest continually inhabited city in the world. Which is based on a place called Gaziantep, which is in southern Turkey, which was hit by the earthquake recently. So it's based on a real place, but I couldn't really set it there because it didn't quite suit the plot. And I didn't set out to write a trilogy either because I had no contact. Even though I worked in television, everyone sort of assumes everyone knows each other in media, and it's very ghettoized. I knew lots of people in TV. I didn't know a single person in publishing. So I didn't have an agent. I didn't have a publisher. I didn't know anything. And so when I was writing Sanctus, I thought, well, this could be it. This just needs to be a self-contained book. I never set it up to be the beginning of something. Um, but the central conceit of Sanctus is this thing called the sacrament, which is this ancient relic, which has been kept in this tower, this monastery tower in the center of the city of Ruin in southern Turkey. And no, and it's been there so long that it's sort of the whole place has become a bit like a kind of Lourdes, a sort of Mecca kind of place, one of these sort of religious places where people flock to and buy
Hmm.
T-shirts
Hmm.
and buy, sort of pens full of holy water and whatever. And the secret of the sacrament is that people think it's this powerful relic upon which all of Western religion was built, but no one knows what it is. Some people think it might be the tree of knowledge from the Garden of Eden. Some think it might be the true cross of Christ. Some think it might be the body of Christ himself, sort of laid, undisturbed by time. But no one knows because the sacrament, this relic, is guarded and looked after by this order of monks. And they ascend. They sort of are kind of lifted up on a platform to the top of this tower of rock where the monastery is built, and they never come out. So they go up there, they sort of ascend halfway to heaven, look after the sacrament. No one ever comes out. So the secret has been kept for centuries. And the book starts with one of the monks of this order climbing to the top of this tower, making the sign of the body of the cross with his body, and then falling to his death in such a way that he just falls outside the jurisdiction or the monastery grounds around the tower. And so he gets a proper autopsy. And when they're doing the autopsy, they find that he swallowed these things, including a strip of leather with a number on it. And initially they think, oh, is that a verse from a Bible? And then they realize it's actually a phone number. So they ring it. And a phone rings in New Jersey, and it's a woman called Liv Adamson, who's an investigative journalist, and they say, "Oh, we're calling from southern Turkey, and we found this man, whatever." And then she goes, "Oh, I think that's my brother he went climbing in the Taurus Mountains in southern Turkey 8 years ago and was never seen again." So she goes
Wow.
to find out what happened. And now the thing is, with a book like that, if there's this secret thing called the sacrament that no one knows what it is, that at some point in that book you're going to find out what this thing is.
Right.
And that was the whole thing. And so the twist was what it was and the big reveal and everything. And I knew just instinctively, as soon as you knew what the sacrament was, as soon as that's revealed, the book's pretty much over. But by that stage, you've spent 400 pages getting there with lots of action and setting up characters and intrigue and relationships. And so you can't just go, yep, well, this is what the sacrament is, the end. You have to sort of let everyone down. You have to kind of go, this person was fine in the end, and this is what happened here. So you have to kind of, sort of tie everything up. And so when eventually, like, wind forward a year or so, and I've got an agent and it's out to auction and loads of people wanted to buy it, and I finally went with HarperCollins in the UK and the
So
US.
they bid. People were bidding. They were going after this.
Yeah, I mean, I cut a lot. So basically,
Agents and publishing houses were excited about it.
yeah, no, it went to an auction. Yeah, so there was a bidding war on it. I mean, but this was, it took me another 18 months on top of the 6. It took me 2 years from start to finish to write this book. And I got an agent, and then they made me rewrite it several times. And then they eventually sort of they sort of released it at the same time. And then, then there was a bidding
What was the
war.
rewrite about? What was the kind of essentially what they felt was needed to be accomplished with the rewrite?
Well, it was too long. And also because I came from the world of television, every 30 pages, I kept recapping what had already happened, because that's what you do in television. You go, by the way, this is just to recap what you've already read. And I remember my agent was going, why do you keep telling us stuff that we've already read? And I was like, well, because that was, 40 pages ago. And she was like, so? It's like, people have got memories. And I was like, oh yes, it's books, not TV. I love this.
Oh, that's funny.
So a lot of it was stripping out recaps and people
And you took
standing
it down. Page count. Final page count was what?
Oh well, I took about 30 or 40,000 words out of it. And it was a real process.
About 110, about
110, 110, something like that, 109, I think. Oh, something.
So when you decided you were going to quit your job and go do this, what did your gut tell you? Did you have a lot of confidence, or was it one of these things that I don't want to get to the end of life and say that I never even tried, so I'm just going to try? Or did your gut tell you this is going to work, just do it?
It was two things. One was I was quite miserable where I was in the company. I'd sort of taken a staff job. I think it's always dangerous if you do anything creative to get too comfortable, because you sort of, and also what happens is if you got a staff job in an independent production company, and you make a successful show, they just want you to make that show again or a version of that show endlessly because, it's risk averse and they know you can do that. And so creatively, it's ever decreasing circles, and the more successful you get, and the high, the higher your salary is, and the longer your job title, the less creative it is because then there's a pressure for you to produce, and the best way to produce is to produce something you've already done. Just a different, you get known as the guy who does this type of show. So creatively, I'd been there for a while, and I'd taken the job really because I had young children, and it seemed like a sensible thing to do. But I knew that I needed to leave and do something else creative. I knew that I'd always wanted to write. Like when I was younger, when I was at Goldsmiths, I wrote screenplays. I wanted to be a film director, really, and studied screenwriting, and nearly got a couple of indie films away. But producing a film is hard because you write something and it's just the beginning because you then have to finance it, cast it, shoot it, edit it, get a distributor, and market it, all that sort of stuff. Whereas if you're writing a book, it's a finished thing. The written thing is the thing. It's not the beginning of anything.
Right.
So
Right.
I decided that's what I was going to do because it seemed like a sensible thing to do rather than try and write another screenplay that may or may not go anywhere. I thought if I try and write a book, at least it's a finished thing. It's a finished product that I can then sell. And I came from the world of commercial television, so I kind of knew I could write. I was known as a writer. I would write pilot scripts for things. I'd write proposals for things.
Fiction writing is totally different, right?
It's not totally different. I would say it's not totally
you have
different.
facility with the language, but at the same time, even Tom Wolfe, who wrote, great nonfiction books, admitted that when he went to write Bonfire of the Vanities, he was crestfallen. It was like, what's going on here? I can't write this. He had always been working with information and writing nonfiction. You've got it's architecture. And you got
yes, you when you're doing nonfiction,
especially the kind of fiction you did because you literally created a town in a world, a different world or a different operating system. Or not?
No, it was. Well, I think the similarities are
it's not Discworld. It's not. You didn't do it.
No, exactly. It's very much. It's based. It has its roots in reality. It's firmly based in reality, and the town worked. It's not like it had a different currency or anything. It kind of worked according to the logic of the actual world. No, I think the thing is, so my job in TV, I ended up as a development executive, which basically means you come up with shows. So my entire job was coming up with shows, and I would go and you get a brief and then so I was always quite creative anyway in terms of spinning something out of nothing. And I knew I could write, I'd often be a script doctor in-house, people would come to me with their show scripts and I would polish them, and add jokes or make them better. And so I sort of knew I was good. I had a facility, I had a gift really with language.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I had the discipline in the sense of, you turn up at work and you sit down and you produce something because that's your job. So there wasn't going to be any sense of staring out the window waiting for the muse to strike, because I knew that you basically had to hunt the muse down, tie it up, and make it do your bidding. And I knew how to do that. I also worked in commercial television as well, and the structure of commercial television. So like a commercial hour, for example, normally has in the UK it'd have 3 ad breaks, 4 parts, 3 ad breaks, and so you have to construct a narrative that reaches a minor crescendo at the end of a part with a big cliffhanger question mark to stop people turning over during the ads and come back for the next part. And so I knew how to sort of structure, and a book's the same, books, thrillers in particular are the same. You have to sort of, build to a crescendo in the midpoint of Act 1, a bigger one at the end of Act 1, then build to a midpoint in the middle of Act 2.
So you understood all of that.
I understood all that. I understood
the
structure
arc and evolution of the character.
I understood narrative structure, and I knew that they were the same because I read loads of thrillers and I recognized the patterns, and I thought, okay, so that's innate. I know how to structure something. I know how to pace something. I know I can sit down in front of a laptop and produce some words. I know I can create things, and but yes, I mean the Tom Wall thing is the thing about, and this is all authors say this is the only way to learn how to write a book is to write a book. You know, you can do all the creative writing courses, listen to all the podcasts, and it's inspirational and it's good, and you can take things from it. But practically, the only way you are going to figure out how to write a book is to sit down and write a book because everyone
Wow.
does it differently, and there is no right or wrong. There is just getting it done. And
So there's
sometimes it's
6 months.
messy.
You gave yourself 6 months. Did you put in an extraordinary number of hours per day because the clock was ticking?
No, I sort of, I think what happened was very early on, I kind of realized that this idea, once I'd committed to it, which I did fairly quickly, I sort of, only took me a couple of weeks where I suddenly thought, no, this is the best idea. This is what I'm going for. And I started researching and I started plotting and I started thinking about the things I needed to learn in order to kind of in order to sort of, gather the material I needed to weave this world that I was going to build. And and because I knew then that it was just going to take too long, and I thought I can either just like wake up, grab the laptop, and just be hunched over it all day long until I'm exhausted for 6 months, and maybe I'll get close to doing a draft, or I can be sensible and go, look, it's going to take longer. It's a bigger idea than I'd planned. It's the best idea, so we're going to go for it. And also, I'm in France with my young family, and I don't want to. I don't want to sort of not have an experience here. I don't want to look back
Right.
and go, oh yeah, do you remember that time in France? And everyone's going, yeah, I remember you locked in a room for 6 months. So I sort of, I just I would get up and I would normally work for a couple of hours in the morning and then sort of have long lunch and would go and do something or whatever. And then I'd work for a couple of hours in the afternoon or 2 or 3 hours in the afternoon. And then we'd put the kids to bed and whatever and watch something and then go to bed. Then I'd get up early and, repeat. And that's what I did. And I
So
kind of, I
four or
still
five,
do that. Yeah,
maybe
about
4 or 5 hours.
yeah, because I've found, and again, I knew this from TV, is that you can force yourself to work longer, but it's not particularly effective. I think you
Yeah.
you have about 4 to 5 hours. Now I'm a bit older, probably less. Really good quality hours where you're sort of you can run at full tilt, really. Where your creative juices are all there, where you are fully engaged, where you can allow yourself to sort of get into some sort of flow state or whatever. And then beyond that, what happens is your brain just is exhausted and starts trying to distract yourself. It starts saying,
Yes.
"Why don't you go on YouTube and look at cat videos?" And you're
Right.
like, "That sounds like a great idea." Oh, well, I wonder what's happening on Twitter. Well, nothing. And But that's just your brain telling you that it's bored. And if your brain's bored, it's just not going to do your bidding. It's just not going to.
Right.
And so like I've sort of perfected that a bit now is that I do. Have you ever heard of the Pomodoro method?
I have not.
So the
Pomodoro
Pomodoro
as a
method, it was some person, I can't remember who it was, but someone came up with this. It's sort of a creative tool, really. Oh, it's a productivity tool because they realize, and it comes from science, proper scientific kind of study and it's based on the thing that the brain as an organ can only function in the same way as, if you couldn't sprint full tilt for an hour, you could maybe do it for 30 seconds. There is a limit to what you can accomplish with the biological tools we have. And one thing is the brain can only really properly concentrate for a certain amount of time. And so this person, what they did is they had it's called the Pomodoro method because Pomodoro is is it
tomato.
Italian or Spanish for a tomato? Yeah. And they had one of those, those kitchen timers in the shape of a tomato that you twist, and it's sort
Yes.
of and it counts down from it's 50 minutes, and you can put it on the old before we had timers on our phones.
15
It's
or
like a
50.
50, so it'd
Okay.
be like a clockwork or 40 minutes, whatever it is. So it's a clockwork device that looks like a tomato, and you twist it, and it ticks away, and then when it gets to the end, a bell goes off. And so he had this thing, and he went, right, I am just what task I'm doing, I'm going to twist the tomato, put it down, and while that's ticking away until that goes off, I'm not allowing myself to do anything else other than whatever the task I've set myself. And it's really effective because if you know you have a finite amount of time, you can focus because you go, well, I can focus, I can go for it, and I can really sort of like force myself to do this because you
I
know that the bell will go off and then you can have a break.
Yeah, I have heard of this method, but then the bell goes off and you take a break for X amount of time, right? And then you can go back for 50 more minutes. Is that
That's
right?
it. So you work
Well,
for
how long a
you.
break?
So I normally work for about 45 minutes, for 45, 4, 5. And then I'll probably take about 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes break.
Mhm.
And that could be anything. You could just go for a walk. You could, look at cat videos on YouTube. Although it's good to get away from the screen, do some laundry, tidy up the breakfast stuff, have a cup of tea with your wife, whatever, read a book, just something different. Walk
Yeah,
the
and it
dogs
keeps
quickly.
the it
It's
keeps
just
your
something
mind
to give
fresh.
yourself a little break. And actually, the thing about it is if you break your day up, I've realized that, your creative day into that is you are subconsciously still working on something. Because when the bell goes off, you stop. There's no, oh, I'll just finish this chat, sometimes when the bell goes off, I will stop mid-sentence. And it's actually quite good because when you come back, the easiest thing to do is finish that sentence. Hemingway used to do that. He used to, he'd stop the day's work in the middle of a sentence because then the next day it was easier to get started again because you just finished the sentence. You go, all right, yeah, I
Yeah,
know where that's going, and then you're already working. And so it's
interesting.
all of these little tricks you play yourself because starting's hard, but once you got going, it's okay.
That
So
is
I
the
would do
hardest part is just getting started. Yeah.
getting going is hard. So yeah, so I think and having a routine, just going right. At this point I'm going to sit down. I'm going to start a time, and I've got a timer on my laptop now, which I can get going. And then what happens is and then I go into focus mode on Word, so it's just black screen with document, and then when the alarm goes off, it just jumps out of focus mode and goes back to the desktop. So it's finished. You can't miss it. And you go, right, oh, that's time to finish. I've done my 45 minutes. I can now have a cup of tea or whatever, go to the shops
Yeah.
quick or whatever you need
Yeah.
to do.
So 2011, Sanctus is a smash hit. It is the best-selling, check me on this, the best-selling thriller book of the year in Great Britain.
That's right. Debut thriller. Yeah. Biggest selling debut thriller in 2011.
So you were off in, I mean, did you have this sense? Well, I mean, what did that mean to you? Did you feel like I've got a career started? So I'm off and running. Um, what what was the impact of that for you?
Well, the first thing was it was great, of course. It was amazing, and it was very unexpected. I genuinely thought my first book might get me an agent, my second book might get published, or might, and then my third book might sell a few copies. I had a 5-year, 3-book plan. And if it hadn't happened by then, I was just going to go back to full time doing TV stuff. Um, but the first book hit and was a huge hit and was translated into lots of languages. And so all of a sudden I was touring the world with this book. But at the same time as I was touring the world with the book, I now had a 3-book because we sold it to HarperCollins, my editors had 2 questions. One is they said, okay, what do you want to write next? And the other thing was, we really don't like the ending of Sanctus. We really need to think about how we can do that. And this goes back to that thing I said is, if there's a book with a big secret in it, once you've revealed the secret, it ends. And so the way I dealt with that, and again, because I didn't expect it to be the first of a trilogy, I just thought it might be a one-off. I had a sort of 1 year later epilogue, which kind of tied everything up really neatly in about 3 pages. And they hated it. They said, it's this just feels wrong, a wrong way to end the book. And so actually those 2 questions of what do you want to write next and how you're going to fix the ending, they sort of solved each other because when I thought about it, I said, well, actually the next book I write could be that ending, but rather than 1 year later, we just see what happened. We just see that year unfold. So rather than me telling you what happened, we see it unfolding. We see it happen in real time. And I had an idea. So the first book was predominantly about the female character. The second book was predominantly about the male lead, and the ramifications of the revelation of this sacrament, this relic. And then the third book could be how both of their destinies kind of come together to resolve the story. And they went, great, sign you up to a 3-book deal. So all of a sudden, I've got this really successful book and a 3-book and 2 more books to write, and also a deadline because they like a book a year. That's what they
Yeah.
really like. And so I've gone from taking 2 years to write a book. And genuinely, with that first book, I thought, 40 years of life experience and sort of pent up wanting to write a book is in this book. I'm not sure if there's anything left. I don't know if there's anything left because I chucked a lot into this book. And then all of a sudden, and then so I was writing the follow up on in the shadow of this success of the first book, and suddenly thinking, what if this is terrible? What if that was the only time I could do it? I've learned now, having written several books and spoke to lots of authors, that all authors feel this all the time. You're always every book you're thinking, yeah, I'm going to be found out on this one. This is the one I won't be able to finish. This is the one where I'm found out. This is the one that will be terrible. It's like,
Or you just
because,
run out of ideas, right? There's
well, and you run out of steam, don't you? In the middle of a book, the initial idea of the kind of the thrill of the idea of thinking, oh, that's a good idea is gone because you're whatever,
you're
maybe,
swimming in it.
yeah, you're 60,000 words in. You're as far away from the end as you are from the beginning. You've still got the end to write. There's loads in the bit that you've already written that needs to change. It's sort of you kind of you're lost in the woods and not quite sure how you're going to get through to the clearing. And it's hard, but it happens every time. I've realized this
Sure.
now, but like when I was writing the second one, I just thought, oh, maybe this is it. Maybe I've just run out of steam. Maybe that was a one-off. Maybe it was I'm a one-hit wonder and I should go back to TV. So it was hard. It was really hard. And in
Well,
the end, it was the thing that kept me going was just the discipline. It was like, no, you just got to turn up and do it. You just
exactly.
got to produce something. Yeah, you turn up, you
Yeah.
do.
Don't worry about being inspired. Just do the work. It'll take care of itself along the way. I mean, that's maybe the best advice that I ever received was just, you don't attach emotion to the work you do, just do it. And then things clarify along the way. They just work or they don't work. And you be willing to give up the idea and you do some and you come up with a new idea. Who do you write for? Do you write for yourself? Do you write for the market? Do you write? There's a guy named he's passed away a few years ago named Larry Y. Woody, who said the proper way to write a novel is you write it for a person. It might be your wife, it might be a friend, it might be a brother or sister, and you're writing for that person. Now that's one person's opinion. When you're writing, who are you writing for? Is it for yourself?
I think so. I'm writing for the reader in me. And I believe that's true. I think you are writing for one person. I know you're writing and you want lots of people, ideally you want loads of people to read your story ultimately. But, if you think about the mechanics of reading a book, it's an author writes a story, a reader picks up that book and then reads it, and between the two of you complete the story. It's a contract between two people. It's not like you don't get like five people clustered around a book all reading it at one time. It's one person flipping those pages.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I'm writing it, I'm really just trying to write a good story that I as the reader would want to read. And I'm trying to entertain me as a reader. I'm trying to inform me as a reader. I'm trying to hoodwink me as a reader. I'm trying to kind of pull the wool over my own eyes. And I think that's good because what that does is it means you avoid lazy ways out. You avoid cliche. Because the thing is, as writers, we're all readers first, and we all will read far more than we'll ever write because you can read much quicker. And so our skills, our faculties, our sort of our honed talents and instincts as readers are always going to be far and away more powerful than our ones as writers. And I think that's why writing's hard, because you're stumbling along. You can read brilliantly. You can pick up any book and read it like flawlessly and conjure it in your mind and everything and see the characters. But writing is really hard because you're piecing that all together, brick by brick. And so I think what I try and do, and it's very hard, but I try and when I'm writing, I give myself permission to be bad. I'll write and I try and turn off my reader's head, which means I don't edit as I go along. I try not to edit as I go along. I try not to finesse as I go along, because the trouble is, as soon as you engage that right brain analytical part, that is going to look at something and assess it and go, oh, that's not, as a reader, as a powerful, sort of superpower reader, going, that's not good enough. It's just demoralizing
Mm.
to your scrawny writer self, your left brain self, going, oh my God, that's terrible. So what you need to do is you need to, as much as possible, just switch off your right brain. Or is it the left brain? It's one half. I can't remember which one, but
The
one's,
right side being the creative side, the left
yeah,
side
you're
being
right.
the
Right side's
logical
creative, left
side.
side's, yeah,
I
exactly. So you need
I
to
don't even
engage.
know if physiologically that I did hear somebody say physiologically that's not really, it's just a handy way to refer to it. But what you're saying, yeah, absolutely. And it's tantamount, the way I've described it is pushing the accelerator and the brake simultaneously.
Yeah,
You have
exactly.
to
That's it.
write without a brake. Just go ahead and use the accelerator. Then afterward, you've got all the time in the world to pass judgment and rewrite. I think you've said, and probably every writer who's ever done any real writing has said that writing is really all about rewriting.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's 90% rewriting. And actually I think when you're starting out and when I occasionally do sort of courses and things with people, is what's really evident is unpublished authors, people who want to be published, start lots of things and don't finish them. They'll go, oh, well, I started this thing and then I ran out of steam and then I had this other idea and then I did it, or I did a draft and then I didn't like it. And you're like, okay, well, so what you're missing out on here is developing an absolutely crucial skill, and that is the ability to take your work and make it better. Because we can all produce something, we can all write something, but then when you read it and go, oh, it's not very good, actually what I'll do is I'll start something new and that will be better. I mean, it probably will be. You probably will just get better instinctively at making the right choices, and so your first draft will be better. But it will always be a first draft, and therefore it will always be not very good.
Yeah.
You know, um,
Which
back to
not everybody gets in the beginning. That the greatest
no,
writers,
I think
the
there's
most
pressure, isn't there? You sort of think, oh God, I need to be able to, be Mozart and just sort of producing perfect,
well, they think the
prose.
greatest writers are producing great first drafts, and it's just not true. I mean, everybody's writing, basically tripe to
Yeah,
start, and then it's all about the alchemy. It's all about the alchemy.
it's about
Um,
the editing. It's about the
yeah,
editing.
yeah.
Exactly.
What?
It's that, but that's the skill you need to learn, and that's the thing, and
Yeah.
that's
So
the,
people keep
like
giving up.
rewriting. You need to
Yeah, they
rewrite,
keep
and people don't want
abandoning.
to rewrite. They don't want to, and also they just get precious. Oh, I can't get rid of that because that's a beautiful. That needs to be in
Right.
that beautiful phrase, and you're like, no,
It's
it doesn't.
meaningful to
It's not telling the
me.
story.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
What
You
is
need
your
to be.
mental state when you're writing? And obviously you're getting rid of the censor. I get that. That's more mechanistic sort of decision. But do you have an emotion, an attitude of some kind that you try to adopt while you're writing, or as naturally comes to you while you're writing? How would you describe your mental state when you're in the middle of a writing session?
Well, my kids think I'm mad because they'll sort of walk past the room and hear me talk, because I talk to myself all the time, and I say things. I'll write something and then say it out loud, especially dialogue and everything, and they'll kind of poke their head in and go, "Dad, you're talking to yourself again," and I'm like, "Yeah, am I? Okay." Um, but that's, I think, because you sink into it. You really have to inhabit it. I and so and often what I'll do is I will I'll listen to soundtrack music, nothing lyrical. I can't listen to anything lyrical because you end up just singing along. But I'll, for The Clearing, the book that came out last year is all set in an ancient wood. It's in modern day, but this really old wood, which is sort of, full of runaways, and there's this kind of off-grid community in it called The Clearing where strange things are happening. And so I downloaded things like the soundtrack to The Revenant and the soundtrack to The
Mhm.
Village, the M. Night Shyamalan film, and things like. And I just, because they're music that's been written to set a certain mood in a certain location, and so I will just play that on repeat, and to the point where I'm not even listening to it. So it's sort of, not only does it drown things out, sort of extraneous noises in your immediate world, which is quite, it cocoons you in sound, really. And I'll put
But you're
earphones on.
carefully selecting the
I'm
music to
I'm
fit the task
selecting, yeah,
or the
the
ambiance that you're trying to create.
Exactly. And if I'm writing an action scene, I will listen to the soundtrack to The Bourne Identity or something like that, something that's driving. And because what that does is it's sort of, music is a very shortcut way of creating an emotion and a feeling within yourself. And I think if
Yes.
you're feeling those feels, it kind of translates. It sort of puts you, it sort of attunes you. If you're an instrument, it's like the tuning fork that goes, right, you need to be vibrating at this kind of pitch and it will help you do the stuff. It's not, it's not, I don't sort of go I don't endlessly sort of have like a jukebox situation where I'm selecting the perfect track. I will just have a sort of bed of music, on a Spotify
Right.
playlist stuff, and I will just
Yeah.
play it and I will go into it and I'll put it on shuffle. So it's, it's going all over the place and it's all ambient but it's all helping me create a mood and also shut out the world. I think I find that very helpful. Uh,
Yeah, very interesting too. There was one other person had a program, I forget. It was a woman, and she said that she had a soundtrack. Now, it wasn't quite the way you were using it. She was using it just to get herself going, kind of inspired and just out of the starting blocks. But yeah, what you're doing with these, selections of music that are apropos for the scene that you're writing or the chapter that you're writing, that makes a lot of sense. What would you say is the strongest part of your writing game? What do you do better than anything else? There's a lot of different components to writing. Is it dialogue? Is it characterization? Is it plotting? I mean, what would you say is your superpower when it comes to writing, or the closest thing you've got to a superpower?
well, looking from the inside out, I just think I'm bad at all of it, because like you just spend your entire time writing something and then having to rewrite it because it's wrong. And so you sort of everything's a struggle, whatever you're working on is a struggle. I mean, weirdly, people have said right from the get-go that when Sanctus came out, they went, "Oh, you can really tell he worked in television and comes from a visual background because it's a very visual book. You can really picture it." And that was a weird one because actually, when you write for TV and film, you don't describe anything. You don't need to. It's all structure and dialogue. Um,
Precisely.
and so actually that was the hardest, that was the thing I had to learn the most is figuring out how to create pictures without, pages of description and I really worked on that because I realized that was something that, I was not transferable from my TV writing. It was something that I needed to, really focus on.
Did you have
And
trouble trusting your readers in the beginning with regard to that? In other words, look, you don't have to describe everything. You can put a couple marks of distinction there, and the reader knows what to do with those. They fill it out. It's not
well,
like, I mean, that's one of the things I say about why there's a lot of people who don't read books anymore. And I say, the thing, I love movies too, but I have no control over the movie. The director does everything. When I read a book, I'm co-creating with the author because they're not describing um, every little characteristic about a character. Some that over describe and all that, but my imagination actually kicks into gear. You don't need your imagination with a movie because it's all right there. So, did
no,
you have trouble at all thinking I need to? The reader's not going to get this unless I really give them what an agent or an editor might say. That's too much information you're giving them.
Well, that's exactly what happened. Is so when I submitted the first draft started sending it out to agents, and then an agent was agent who actually is still my agent now.
Oh, the
And I said,
recaps.
"What?"
You mentioned the recaps.
So she said about the
It's a little
recaps.
different,
Why,
though.
why do you keep telling us stuff we already know? And then it was, and I got, and what they did, and it was very good of them because they didn't sign me straight away. They said, "We'll work on you with this book, and then we'll see how we work together." And so it was a real kind of leap of. They liked the book and they liked the story, and they obviously could see me, that I had something. And they were prepared to work with me unsigned. On a couple of drafts, and this was they went through and did a proper kind of line by line edit and with notes and comments and everything of the entire manuscript. And I went through it, and I remember having a call with them, going through it line by line. But again, in TV, I'm used to doing that. You're used to going through, sort of notes on a viewing and going time codes, specific seconds, milliseconds of a thing, and you discuss stuff. And so I did the same thing with this, and it was like a masterclass really in editing of just like figuring it out, of them just saying, well, you don't need that because of this. And exactly what you just said. It's like you need to they said you need to let the reader in. If you do everything, then there's no room for the reader, you're pushing them away. And what you need to be doing is letting them in. You're welcoming them in, and it's that whole thing. And this is the thing I've kind of realized more as I've written more books is, um, I think I put in less now in my first drafts, but I still take a lot out in my second drafts because it's that thing, in your first draft, you're figuring it out yourself to a degree. And so you probably do over describe and overwrite a scene and more said than needs to be said. And then you go through it once you get to the end and know the whole story and know those characters because you spent time with them more. That's when you can take things away. I would say it's like, a really good caricaturist can just in 5 lines do a portrait of someone, exactly who it is.
Yes.
In 5 lines, you go, oh, I can see that's Clint Eastwood.
Right.
You take one of those lines away, you can't tell who it is. And then you can add 20 more lines and it doesn't give you any more information. You still knew after 5 lines it was Clint Eastwood because your brain is this amazing thing and does everything else. And that's what good writing is. It's sort of, you want to pare it down to the point where if you take anything else away, it stops making sense. And if you add anything more, what you're doing is just kind of cluttering up the space and pushing the reader away. So it's sort of knowing that sweet spot of exactly what you need to do. And so that I think because I suppose it was the thing I needed to learn from the beginning, and because I sort of knew I wanted to make the world very visual. And so I really went to town. One of the other things I did as well when I was writing Sanctus is I reread several books that I thought were useful in terms of there were elements of those books that what I needed in Sanctus. So one was the Umberto Eco's The Name of the Rose, which is set in a monastery, although it's medieval, but it was very useful in terms of just sort of sort of how the mechanics of the inner workings of something is kind of laid out, whilst at the same time a plot is going on. I reread The Silence of the Lambs because my main character is like Clarice. She's brave, but she manages to succeed not by becoming a proto man, but by leaning into her kind of female strengths. Brave but curious. I love that kind of character. And I read One Shot, which is I think the 6th Jack Reacher book, because I really liked the way he did action, and I just thought, and what's really good I found, and I still do it, is by reading a book that that you were impressed by first time round, it had an effect on you as a reader. But then rereading it when you know what happens, so you're not distracted by the plot, and you can really just look at the mechanics of what is going on, to the point of counting how many words are in a sentence and how many lines are on a page and all those sorts of things, and just sort of thinking technically what's going on here. I know it works because it worked on me. Now I just want to pull it apart and sort of see, sort of the strings. I want to kind of like pull back the curtain and see the workings and the clockwork.
Yes.
And that's what I did. And so I think my sort of visual storytelling, which is still remarkable. People always comment and like my books are very visual, is something I think is hard won. But I think that's one of the things I think I'm good at. And it's something, it's something I'm very aware. I'm very conscious of. It's something I learned and something I had to work on. So I suppose I'm proud of it because it was not easy.
Yeah, no, it's very analytical. Your approach is very analytical and very sensible. You're very extroverted, and a lot of times authors, you sit alone in a room, but for an extrovert, sitting alone in a room is not necessarily exactly Xanadu. But I get the sense that you are on the move a lot. You walk for ideas, you'll pace and be giving voice to dialogue. Do you find that do you approach writing a little bit differently, or are you literally, fanny in the seat for 95% of the time, or do you go on the move a lot and maybe with a recorder and talk into it or whatever?
Well, I always, when I'm walking the dogs, I listen to podcasts and music, mostly podcasts. And so I have my phone. So I often have little ideas. And so I'll just do a little voice memo into my phone, directly into my phone, and just, and it could be anything. It could be a name, line of dialogue. It could be a book that someone's recommended on a podcast. It could be an idea that I've thought of or whatever it is. And I'll just read them in. And then at some point when my voice memo thing is like, about to burst, I'll sit down and I'll transcribe them all. And often that's where an idea will come from, maybe just, the collision of a couple of ideas. I do find I need to get out and about. Yeah, definitely. I sort of, by necessity, sitting and writing means sitting in front of something and being still. But that's what I quite enjoy, touring a book or I quite enjoy the promotional stuff. I quite enjoy stuff like this, talking to
Mhm.
you and meeting new people, and talking about the craft of writing because, it's sort of, well, it's really great to meet other writers. It's also really great to meet your readers. I do lots of library. I like doing library events. Library events I think are very rewarding because they're full of actual proper readers. And yeah, they might not buy your book, but they'll certainly read them. And they'll recommend them. And it's sort of, that's the end, they're the end user, and it's really nice. This goes that contract again of, you end up meeting the person who completes your book. And also, it's also why I did things. So I did those two series of Written in Blood where I, went to represent, the true crime thing where I talk to other authors. I quite like doing different things, whatever it is. I just like doing a different thing, whatever it is. I'm talking to my agent at the moment about maybe doing a theatre thing, where you sort of do a tour of small theatres and it's an evening with, and I don't know what the format is yet, but I just like getting out and doing stuff because
Sure.
I find it energizes. I think it's easier for me to sort of sit for 3 months banging out a draft of a book or a chunk of a book or doing edits on a book or whatever it is, if I know that after that 3 months I'm gonna go and do something else. I still do TV work actually. I do it in tandem with writing the books. Because it's a different skill. It's a skill that I sort of, honed and learned over 20 years. It's more collegiate because you're working with an editor and you have viewings with, sort of commissioning editors and the channel and various things. Um, and it's also quicker, so a book takes a year to write, and I can, from start to finish a TV program, I can turn around in a month and do it at the same time as writing a book. And it's different type of writing. It's also nice because you get paid, like, sort
That's
of,
always nice too. Yeah.
you get paid every month rather than, we'll pay you when your book comes out. And we've decided to shift it to next March. And you're like, oh, great. Thanks. I'll just live on air. And so so it's good. I just think it's just nice. I think, I know some writers are more introvert and love, become writers because it means they can justify sitting alone in a room and shutting out the world. And I quite like that. I'm very happy with on my own and with spending time alone. But I like the mix. I mean, I've got 3 kids as well, so it's like school and sports and plays and music concerts and stuff. So that drags you out and sort of forces you to
Sure.
be sociable.
Yeah. You
But
mentioned soundtracks. Is there anything else you do? Do you take anything when you write ever? Red Bull, marijuana, burn sage, any rituals or anything that you take that helps inspire your writing? Not necessarily every day, but maybe certain times you are looking to enter a little different dimension.
I am British and therefore I drink tea. Um, this is true. I'll have coffee in the morning with breakfast, and then I will start work, and then normally I will break so the kids go to school. So the kids are good as well because you can use them as timing devices. So basically, my youngest, who's is the one that still needs taking to school, she's 11. We drop her off at school at 8, and so we'll have breakfast before, drop her off at 8, back here at about 10. So about 8:30, I can start work, and I'll work. I'll just sit down and I'll write, and I can do 2 sessions, and then at 11 o'clock, what we British call 11s, I will stop for a cup of tea and some form of biscuit slash cake.
Mm-hmm.
To go, and it could be a Kit Kat. I don't know if you're familiar with what a
Oh
Kit
yeah,
Kat
yeah,
is.
yeah.
Yeah.
Chocolate and
And
crunch, and yeah,
chocolate, yeah, wafer, yeah, something like that. A little treat, cup of tea, a little rest, and yeah, that's it. That's my little. So yeah, it's not exactly rock and roll, is it? A cup of tea and a biscuit and a chocolate biscuit. But yeah, that's what I do. It just
not
breaks it up. See,
no
thing is, I've never been a smoker, so I've never sort of had that, or need to go and stand by the bike sheds and have
no
a
oral
cigarette.
fixations and all that. Yeah,
No oral fixations at all that kind of stuff. And then I'll break again for lunch about 1:30, and then I'll work until it's time to pick the kids up. So that's my working day. At some point in there, I'll take the dogs for a walk, depending on how annoying they are or what the weather's doing. And when I'm writing, that's it. That's pretty much it. And then I'll
yeah,
stop when the kids come home. I try and be present for them and not just, like I'll be there and we'll watch things and we'll play games and I'll help them with their homework. And the thing is, my eldest now is doing an English degree, so I still help her with her homework. So like she sent me an essay because it was too long. She basically, it had to be 4,000 words and it was 4,800. And she went, "Oh, I can't take any words out." And I said, "Send it over and I'll edit it." So I edited her essay. And it's nice to be involved and do that. And that's one of the reasons
sure.
one of the reasons I had the midlife crisis was because I wanted to be around. The kids were just growing up really fast, and I just thought, I'm going to miss this. I just want to be at home. And so the whole idea of having a job like being able to write, which is from home, where I'm there and I can drop them off at school and I can cook them tea and be there and not miss a sporting event or a play or whatever, really appealed. And so that was, that was a huge part of the impetus to try and, sort of earn a bit of a living as a writer.
Yeah.
Um,
Name the author.
it's worked.
It's worked for you for sure. Um, Name the author who, more than any other, you would love to get an email or a phone call just saying, "Hey, I love your work. I really admire it. I wanted to tell you, read everything you've written." Would that be Clive Barker? Would it be who?
Oh, I don't know. It would be, Clive Barker was a big influence. I read lots of his when I was younger. And I loved the fact that he was British. And
Sure.
I thought, yeah. Um, it probably, and you probably get this up, but it's probably Stephen King.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, because I discovered him like, I was way too young really to start reading King. And I think the first one I read was The Dead Zone, which is sort of entry level. It's not that horrific.
Yeah. I read
It's
that one
more,
too. Yeah.
yeah, I can't remember, I was about 11 or 12 or something. And then you sort of start reading, Pet Sematary and scaring the shit out of yourself. And I just loved it. I just loved it. And I think he's sort of, he's sort of, the grand old man of letters now, isn't he? He's still writing and he's still, and he's got this such kind of cultural impact. Um,
Yes. It's been
it's still,
amazing. He's had
it is. And with the
amazing career.
films as well, you think about the kind of the various
Oh,
films,
everything is turned into a film that he writes, and he also writes good book reviews. If when he
Oh
writes a
no,
book,
no, I think that's it. I
review.
really trust, and he's obviously, voracious reader, always has been, and friends of mine have had blurbs from him, and I'm very jealous. And I just sort of, and I sort of, I suppose he was the first author when I was growing up that I realized was a working author. There was someone who was writing. Well, I was reading his books, and they were writing other ones and producing them. And I know that's true of everyone, but he was the one I suppose I was aware of just because I was aware when a new Stephen King came out and that you'd kind of want to read it, and other people, there was a buzz about it. Other kids who were readers would go, "Ooh, I've got if it was their birthday, they might get it, and then they might lend it to you." And it was that sort of thing. It was sort of yeah, it was like he was like a kind of star. He was like a rock star of a
Yes,
writer.
yes. And he's the one who said, you talk about a blurb, and I don't know that this was actually, yeah, I think it was a blurb, but it certainly was a quote. He said, "I've seen the future of horror, and its name is Clive Barker."
That's right.
He
Yeah.
loved Clive Barker. I mean, really admired his writing. And as do I. I think Clive Barker is really inspired stuff. At
I
any
agree.
rate, you're this has been so full. This conversation has been so full of great advice from you. Um, and, obviously I talk to authors all the time, but I have to say, your approach to it, the analysis of it, there for an aspiring writer who's listening, or even a published author who's listening, you've given some great information here, and the commitment that you made to it as well. Quitting your job. Now, you probably knew, hey, look, you've got skills that I can go back and I can get the job again. But walking away from a job is never an easy thing to do, especially, you had to start with the family. You were married with a couple of kids, even if they were young. So this has been really great. Just to finish up, though, Simon, what would your parting advice be to the aspiring author out there? Is there any kind of bottom line piece of advice you'd give, or any kind of writer quotation that you would cite, or anything that you think would be a good walk away?
Well, I think it's sort of already been said, so I'll just repeat it. But it is that thing of just I think routine is really useful.
Mm.
And I think I didn't realize it when I started out on my journey as a writer, but I already had it through my through TV. So if you work for a TV company, you turn up on a Monday morning and you work till Friday, and you work pretty much 9 to 5, and you sometimes longer depending on what you're working on, and no one's paying you to turn up and stare out the window with your head, your hand draped across your forehead in pain because the muse has deserted you. You are there to be paid to do a creative job and to produce something, to create something. And so I knew that I could do that when I started off. And I think a lot of people sort of are crippled, I think, initially by sort of not all of those things we talked about, thinking that you need to produce a perfect first draft, so you're terrified of writing anything in case it's wrong, all those sort of things. In actual fact, if you get a routine going, because starting is hard, even if it's 10 minutes, even if you've got a really busy job and you've got 10 minutes spare in a day, rather than swiping through Instagram or looking on eBay or whatever, or just deleting emails because you think it's, or playing Candy Crush, whatever it is. If you go, right, every day at 11 o'clock for 15 minutes, I'm going to check out from whatever I'm going to do. I'm going to go and find a little quiet space, and for that 15 minutes, I'm just going to write. I'm not going to edit. I'm not going to question myself. I'm not going to sort of try and craft the perfect sentence or paragraph. I'm just going to write. I am just going to engage my creative head. I'm going to shut up my analytical reader's head, and I'm just going to produce something. That is how you write. That's how you build a story word by word, brick by brick, and you just give yourself permission to do it. And I think if you have a routine, if you sort of carve out it's the same way. It's hard, if you have a busy life and a partner and kids and all this kind of stuff. If you set up and go, right, this is mummy's time or daddy's time or whatever it is, this half an hour, people respect it. They go, oh, that's I know not to mess. I know not to add, because that's your time. That's your half an hour where you go away, you put your headphones on. That's the sign. You twist the tomato timer, whatever it is. That's your sign, and people go, okay, that's
Yep.
your time. We'll leave you alone. And then you it's amazing how much you can achieve in 10 minutes. It's amazing how much you can write in 10 minutes if you enter it committed to write for those 10 minutes. You can write a novel in 10-minute spurts over the course of a year. It might not be very good, but you've got a draft, and then you can make it better. That's the great thing about writing, is like, no one has to read your first draft. No one. You can
Right.
put it in a drawer, and then you come back to it, and then you can really go to engage your reader's head and make it better, and get rid of all the crap stuff, and just make the stuff that does work even better. And then by the time you show it to people, they think you're a genius. They don't know that they haven't read the first draft, and they don't know that that's the seventh draft. But that's the thing. And again, discipline with editing as well. I'm right, for 10 minutes, I'm going to edit a page. I'm just going to read this page, and I'm going to get to the end. And that's all and that's how you can do it. I think sometimes there's a notion of like writing a book is a long time endeavor. It's like climbing a mountain. And And it is, but the thing is, like, you climb a mountain one step at a time. And I think that's the thing. If you break it down into handleable bits to the point where you go, oh, I can do that, whatever it is, don't set
Hmm.
yourself on. I think some people can, you read all sorts of things of like, oh, so and so, this writer writes 5,000 words a day, and this writer can write 5 books a year. You can absolutely weigh yourself down with this useless information, and like, good for them if they can, but it doesn't matter. Most people don't do that. Most people, are happy if they've written, 300 words is a page. If you can write 300 words a day, then in a year you've written 365 pages, and that's a book.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. My guest has been Simon Toyne, and he's a guy who trusted the process, and he's 7 books deep into his novel writing career now. Just to put bookends on his career to date, it begins with Sanctus, big hit, 2011, a bestseller, and most recently, The Clearing. Those are the bookends to date, but he's at work on. I didn't even ask you that. What are you at work on right now, Simon? That you
Uh,
can talk about to whatever degree.
no, well, I've finished writing another Lawton book. So Dark Objects and The Clearing, and the main character is this criminologist called Dr. Lawton Rees, who kind of predominantly works cold cases. And so I've written a third installment, another idea with her called The Dark Highway, which is an old Victorian name for the River Thames. Headless bodies keep getting washing up on the Thames in various places, and she's investigating that. So I've done my first draft, so I've now got my reader's head on, and I'm doing second draft notes. So my editors, I've got UK and US editors both read it at the same time, and I get a whole load of notes from both of them. Most of which coincides, not all. And so I'm working my way through those now. I'm trying to get that done before Christmas, and then that's out. I think that's out next year. It's either out next year or the year after. I can't remember. I think
All up
next
to
year.
publishing company. Yeah. Simon, thank you for coming on the program.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been great pleasure talking to you.